piece of me, boy.
So with the video game space, we got, what, Capcom played a dirty trick on you, Bellular News. And then we got legendary drops on indie games are the enemy now. I think a lot of people have been reviewing this one as well. Anyways, let's start with the Capcom one.
Placing everything on a single roulette wheel. Imagine walking into the casino, placing everything on a single roulette wheel, walking out with a humongous stack of cash. That is something that Capcom do not have to imagine, because they just did it with Monster Hunter Wilds. You see, they needed that game to succeed in order to save their year's financials, but not just to do that, but to save their overall company story of stable growth. Now, they got what they wanted. Monster Hunter Wilds is an incredible success, and per its game design, it completely deserves that. But it's a game that was not without risk, and PC players suffered. Again, as we always seem to do. Now, this time Capcom won. Time and time again, PC gamers are being treated awfully. I mean, one of the nice things about Clair Obscur is people saying, my god, look at this, the PC version appears to work well. And similar with Doom.
Oh yeah, I just got to this
zone.
It
did pay off this time. Looking through the plan that they've just outlined in the
we just
report,
left off in that.
You do have to wonder when their luck will run out. And if this sort of gamble with your customers' trust is really something we should be doing. Monster Hunter Wilds is the best-selling game of the year, and per the Circana data service, it would have been the 6th best-selling game of 2024 as a whole after only 2 full months on sale. That is absolutely wild. That's a bit of a cringe pun. Now, those are staggering figures, especially with how bad PC was. But in spite of the fact the game is still sitting at a mixed rating from users in Steam because of continued performance issues, we actually know that at launch,
I noticed some performance issues as I played too.
Let me explain this, because Capcom needed to save their numbers. Take a look at this video thumbnail. It's the one that I went with. It does look completely absurd and goofy, but it's actually true, and it's why they made this gamble. They basically needed to hit that. Wilds was their last chance to earn major money in that year, and they needed to deliver just under half of their full year's revenue target from just that one game. And if you look at the stat of, more than half in the US being in PC, it's pretty damn clear that they needed to ship a subpar product in PC that was not ready in order to hit those financial goals. So now that we've got the data, we can see how this gamble has paid off for them. This might make me weird, but I genuinely flippin' love earnings reports, so let's dive into this one. They recorded record-breaking growth for the 8th year in a row, and that's built off the back of not just reaching targets, but exceeding them. Wilds had 10 million sales. It caused their catalog...
Oh shit, go now. What is it? Capcom earns record profits in all profit categories for 8th consecutive year. During the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2025, Capcom's core digital contents business drove results, delivering annual sales of 51.87 million units. A million units from previous year. Sold over 10 million units. Capcom achieved record high net sales profit. This is Haruhiro Tsujimoto. So I'm guessing this is the director or something.
Them. Wilds had 10 million sales. It
IR.
caused their catalog sales to surge. And yes, that also does mean, right? 10%
Capcom,
of all Monster
like
Hunter
their
games
PR speaker
ever
or
sold
some shit.
in the history of Earth. Don't know if they have Monster Hunter elsewhere, but they are copies of Wilds, sold from the end of February 2025 through to now. That is fucking savage performance. Now for them, overall games were up 8.9% in operating income for a total of 125 million yen. That's 4 times bigger than every other arm of Capcom, and my god, does Capcom have arms. Pachinko machine income was up 62.8%. Esports/media, 181%. And arcades up by 30%.
Are you saying that everything that they've invested in, they've made a big profit in?
The way you guys do the sports ball? Hey, why don't you have Electronic Arts Pachinko? We'd all love it. And I actually bring that up because they're kind of one step away from doing the whole sports gambling thing.
Oh yeah, EA. Yeah, I'm pretty sure EA is gonna do something pretty
example, Resi 4 remake.
Especially now that they've been getting strangled on the loot boxes and shit.
Capcom. Well deserved. It's a banging game. But basically everything is doing well, and while catalog sales is going to be a major point in a few minutes, let's answer the question of that big, juicy thumbnail of the many, many yens that they needed to rake in. Did they rake in what they needed? The answer is yes. And again, with half of copies in the US being in PC, they needed to sell you that busted, unacceptable release in order to hit their financial forecast. And that's the bit that matters here. It's why shit happens. And the reason why I talk about it is whenever bad stuff happens, you notice it, you get pissed off, you're disappointed. I want to help arm you with info so you know actually why this stuff happens instead of just random theories. Now, overall, net sales are up 11.3%, operating income is up 15.2%, and profit is up 11.7%. So in business terms, they made all of the right calls, even, perhaps especially, those calls that were driven by bad incentives that are bad for their devs and that are bad for you. What we see is Capcom be rewarded for releasing a product despite doing so for the wrong reasons.
Yeah,
they could have delayed Monster Hunter while
that is a little bad, right?
Actually good.
That
it was
still
basically
be
what you deserve as a paying customer.
Yeah,
but the incentive that
to
they had in
give
front
a
of them
subpar
had nothing to do with the video game,
product,
and nothing to do with you,
and then to
other than
be
the amount of money you could
gestured,
represent for them,
right?
because instead it
Gestured
was
with
about their balance sheet. They
right,
needed
a
Wilds to
good
release and
balance
to
sheet,
sell, and they needed that because they needed to maintain their streak of growth, right? This isn't like Duolingo. Capcom can't get around breaking their streak with a microtransaction. Their overall company story is one of an amazing plan
Capcom
that's been happening
has
over years,
same with
successes,
Exoprimal.
and
I'm pretty sure
continued steady
Exoprimal
growth.
didn't
They could
do
not
too
afford
well
to break
either.
that trend, because remember, the people who own Capcom stock expect the
Capcom
value of that stock
tends
to
to
go up.
do some
That is why
weird
they
things
own it.
sometimes.
And their comparative struggles
But
through
I
the
mean,
middle
even
of
then,
the
right,
2010s,
they aren't
kind
hurting
of
that
over.
much, right?
They've got this plan to
Their
achieve
stocks
a
are up.
medium-term goal of 10% growth every year for 10 years. And do you know what? They've bloody well done it. They're on their 10th consecutive year of 10% profit growth. Their system works. But this year, the only way they could accomplish that was by putting out a product that was nowhere near as good as it could have been, that did not respect their customers.
I mean, it is true.
And we saw this
It could
last
have
year.
been better.
Last year, to a lesser extent, it
I
happened
mean,
with
all of
Dragon's
these
Dogma.
games could
That's
have
a
been
game that
better.
launched
Same with Doom,
significant
right? Doom the Dark
problems.
Age.
Again,
yeah. Same with Doom the Dark Ages. Right, that game could have been literally just as good as Doom Eternal, but they for whatever reason took it back a little.
they could have delayed it, right? You can always delay a game to fix up those problems. They chose not to. They preserved their corporate story. That is infuriating. They should
same
treat
with
you
that.
better, but I do want to be clear
Same
about
with
one thing.
Dragon's
This does
Dogma
not take
too.
away from the achievement of the game designers behind these games, because those are games worthy of being made, worthy of
basically
being released, but they could have been even better if
games,
Capcom
unfortunately.
hadn't needed to release them to meet targets that are all about making a line go up. It is mercenary logic. It is making the choices that best serve the immediate goals, and it's taking hits to things
Games
like PC
that are
performance
meh.
where those are acceptable. Now, to their credit, right? And I genuinely mean that. Unlike,
on
say,
PC, there's some
Electronic Arts,
performance
where we've talked
issues.
about profit being
I've
solely
noticed
for
that too.
shareholders, this success
I
does somewhat seem to be reinvested
put it
in their
on
staff. I've actually
the
seen
lowest
this across
settings
quite a
because
few
it was
Japanese
just
companies
rough.
recently, and it truly is good. It should be praised. They have a plan for the future to make use of the, quote, human resources investment strategy. That's fluffy words, but the plan basically is they're hiring at least 100 more developers every year, and they're trying to ensure that the ones who remain are fairly compensated. And this year, that involved a stock-based compensation scheme, a 30% wage increase. God damn, that's amazing. And all of that alongside higher starting salaries and a better bonus scheme that's linked to performance. That is awesome, right? The more the companies are doing that, the better, and Capcom should be fucking praised for that, because other companies do not do it properly. It's almost as if Capcom have realized that the games that give them the nice line that goes up are actually made by developers, and if they sort of treat those developers right and pay them more and try to be a competitive employer, then guess what? It'll mean more games, and that'll mean more line go up. But it doesn't make them immune to criticism. That's why this video exists, and you know what? We criticize the things that we love so that they stay on track. Now, basically where they are is they have a stable business plan, they have happy shareholders that seem to be getting what they want over time, and that gets us these great games even if they are not given as much time for polish as they really would deserve. Though, of course, with all this going well, Capcom, of course, plans to keep their plan, this 10% profit growth every year. The line indeed must go up, and they're actually now expecting to make more money next year, up by 12%. But as has been noted by analyst Maro NL, next year, looks a little bit different, and it's how this video gets itself a little bit of a spicy, dramatic ending. Okay, so next year Capcom's releases are looking a little bit different. They're only forecasting 8 million new product sales next year, which actually does make a lot of sense based on what we know. And here's what we know. You've got remasters for Onimusha 2, you've got ports and re-releases for the likes of Street Fighter and Kunitsugami. That'll only take them so far, and their only announced big new game is Onimusha Way of the Sword. And that's likely to be later in 2026, which would be out of financial year 2026 because, you know, just using one calendar is not good enough for the world. Now, there is potential for a new Resident Evil to take the slot that Monster Hunter had this year, but
yeah,
Capcom
the new
so far are
Onimusha.
not willing to commit to their investor forecast.
Yeah, I wonder how that's going to be
happen,
too.
not in the way that they did for Monster Hunter. So basically, with no new games, what'll matter to them is library sales. And they're saying that would instead make up
they
85%
basically
of your total
just
sales between DLC and legacy
reimagine
purchases.
some of their
Now, admittedly, right, that
IPs
does
in a sense.
technically include, say, the rest of the year's
Doing
sales
it
for
in their
Monster
new
Hunter
engine.
Wilds. So it'll be a big number. And of course, any expansion that comes out for that game. So it's not like it's impossible for them to hit their targets. And again, this is Capcom. They've been very clear in their DLC practices, which is where they will sell you as many consumable DLC objects as they can possibly justify to eke a little slice more profit out of the audience. I'm sure you remember there being a big old drama around Dragon's Dogma 2 and all of that stuff. So it's not an impossible target. There's going to be a bit of a lull, but those lulls are natural and okay, and they happen to every developer. I think it's just particularly noticeable here because of the impact that Monster Hunter Wilds had. You see, if Capcom can't have that significant catalog performance match up with the new game sales, then the big test of them as a company starts. Can they maintain this whole dev-first, product-focused production system if a 10-year success streak is broken? And that is what brings us to the logic that drove the decision to actively, knowingly sell you a game that was not up to par. The line must go up, and that matters to you. We know Capcom will compromise if they need to meet a financial demand. And that actually is a little bit of a threat for the future. That's because we know they have no plans to release a massive game within the next financial year. Based on everything that we've seen, it also doesn't seem likely that they would prematurely rush some of their big games into a March release if they look like this year's targets would be missed. But that would put more pressure on the releases of financial year 2026, because that's what all this stuff is. It's pressure to deliver consistent growth with no breaks. And Capcom are handling this as well as they can.
I mean, we already saw Bungie, right? They can fucking... the fucking shit tanked, right? The fucking Ubisoft tanked. EA tanked. Right? EA is trying to crawl back out of the fucking shithole they caused. Who knows if Ubisoft can crawl out of the shithole they caused? Same with fucking, right, Bungie. And Bungie is the fresh one, too. Ooh, I don't know.
And do within the overall corporate system that they have to exist in. Because basically now they're kind of victims of their own success. Whenever you say 10% profit growth every year for 10 years, that's a pretty damn high and impressive bar to hit. And maintaining that success,
especially if you're trying to hit that every time now, or even more.
In the future,
it's like, oof.
Well, will that happen?
That's a big
again?
bar to
Fiscal year
fucking
25 is a tough act to follow, but
that means all of your games have
it.
to hit well
year
with your fan
27?
base.
How will they keep that growth up? How will they keep the line going up and up and up forever and ever?
Yeah, literally each game has to hit.
But there is one reason
well
I
with
would
the
put
fan
a bet
base,
on Capcom.
and you better fucking
we clearly
hope.
see them investing in the thing that matters, the thing that makes their product: developers. They are strongly investing in their developers. What do we see in other companies? Not really the same. The point, though, is that in a video like this, me and the team can basically take something that, let's be honest, is arcane bollocks, right? I mean, you don't learn about the markets and all this shit in school. You're not, like, taught about earnings reports. It impacts so much of the world. It impacts so much of our hobby. I really see my job here as to try and help demystify the, like, big picture reasons why things happen so that you have accurate answers. Because whenever things are dramatic, it's very easy for cheap, convenient, emotionally evocative answers to just take all of the space. But if we actually want to be informed like customers, if we want to perhaps even make better policies for the future, it helps to know how things actually work. So I hope this video has helped. And if you
you would hope that these devs
story,
would put out surveys or do give give certain people playtest, right, to try out the game to get some feedback, right? You would hope. Make sure their game is up to snuff and what people like and whatnot, right? Unfortunately, there's no customer base as subservient as gamers. You can scam them, sell them broken trash, and they'll not only thank you, they'll defend you tooth and nail against criticism. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true sometimes. I mean, you have the right those those white knights, right? The fucking that try to do whatever they can because they're fanatics, right? And they don't want their fucking the company they hold so dear fucking to fall. Alright, there you go, Bellular News. On the Capcom played a dirty trick on you. Yep, they've been selling you subpar. Well, I mean, a lot of fucking video game companies have been doing that, unfortunately. You gotta watch out. A lot of indie companies haven't been doing that too much, because they actually tell you up front what they're fucking putting in their, or what they're selling you. Versus these other guys, it's rough. Right? Alright, let's do legendary drops on how indie games are the enemy now, based on, right, AAA companies' standards.
You need to stop what you're doing right now. I see what you're doing. I saw.
Huh?
You need to stop what you're doing right now. I see what
I don't
you're
got
doing.
my
I
hands
saw
in
what
my
you said.
dick.
You are
What?
not. You should not.
My dick in my
Stop
hands.
celebrating the success of these 30-person studios that are doing more with 30 people than most video game studios can do with 600. No, instead, you need to panic. We all need to panic because the deprofessionalization of the games industry is on the horizon. At least that's what they're calling it. And that means that there are fewer roles in marketing, cultural consulting. Brace yourselves for this one. Less roles in middle management. Oh, God, the horror. So today we're going to be talking about how apparently it's a bad thing that more people are making games on their own, because that means
Why is
less
that?
opportunities for the real professionals.
What?
Oh, yeah,
what
this
does
is
that
going to
mean?
be good. Once success starts happening outside of the system, all of a sudden it's not about whether or not these games are good. No, it's about who's not getting paid to make them. Accountability is a rare thing in the games industry. I've noticed that more times than not. And so many people want to shift the blame onto somebody else. They want to create an enemy out of thin air, or they want to appeal to empathy for job security. And now we need to be careful with how much we enjoy these indie games, because
empathy
it could
for
hurt
job
AAA.
security. I'm
You need
someone
to put
who
down
would
that Expedition 33.
fucking
You might
floor
poke somebody's
someone
eye out with that thing.
if they're
But
doing
before
some
that,
fucking
a word
shady
from
shit.
today's
Did
sponsor. If
security?
game publishers are willing to charge $80
That's my
for digital
security.
games that you don't actually own, track your behavior,
Breaking
and
people's
block content
legs if
behind
I need to.
online-only DRM, what do you think they are doing with your data? Yeah, that's why I use NordVPN, and you probably should too. NordVPN encrypts your internet traffic, blocks trackers and malicious websites with its Threat Protection Pro, and it helps you stay private no matter where you are or
You know
what you're
the
doing
best
online.
form of
It's
security?
fast, reliable, and it doesn't
Striking
log any of
fear
your
in those who
activity,
know- who
which
don't know
is
what
more
the
than I
fuck
can
they're
say for a
messing
lot of
with.
other companies on the internet these days. It also lets you access region-locked content
sure
from
you
anywhere in the
fucking
world,
stick
whether
a
that's
knife
a
in them, right?
documentary that's only available
Slow and
overseas, a
steady.
site that's blocked on your network, or you're just trying to avoid price discrimination. NordVPN gives you the freedom to browse without borders or restrictions. Whether you're sick of targeted ads, censorship, or you just want to take back control of your digital life, NordVPN gives you the tools to do it. Go to nordvpn.com/LDrops or click the link in the
I was trying
description
to
or
look
pinned
at
comment below
like
to
small
get a
indie
major
games that have
discount on
been
a
doing
2-year
well.
plan,
Balatro has
plus
been
4
doing
extra
well.
months for free.
Right, Project
And if you find out
Zomboid's
that it's
been
not
doing
for you,
well.
well, there is a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring today's video. Indie games haven't just found success in recent years, they have dominated, not just as underdogs, but as some of the most beloved and talked about titles in the industry. And
Tainted Grail seems to be doing
on
well,
one end,
right?
you have studios like Larian
That's like
with
an
Baldur's
indie
Gate
game.
3,
Clair
or
Obscur has
Sandfall
been doing
Interactive
well.
with
That's an
Expedition
indie game.
33, well-funded, still operating outside of the grip of traditional publishers. And on the other end, you have solo developers like Tyler with Schedule 1 or Local Thunk, the creator of Balatro. Completely different scales, but the same result. Self-run, self-funded, and most importantly, unrestricted by AAA.
Oh yeah, Clair Obscur.
As tools become more accessible and these games keep hitting both critically and commercially, more creators are jumping in. Some
Schedule
are seasoned
1,
veterans that are
right?
finally
Schedule 1.
breaking free to go make something they actually want to. Others are just complete newcomers. But the point is, they're doing it, and they're doing it on their own. And that's where the friction starts.
Repo
because every new
has been
success
doing
story
well,
from the indie
apparently,
world
with the
exposes just how
streamers.
bloated and inefficient
Especially
the
if you
traditional
have
studio
friends.
system has become. And for some people, that's a threat, especially if your whole
Oh
job
yeah, apparently
exists within
Dune
a
Awakening is
500-person
coming out
pipeline.
soon.
These
That's gonna be
all-purpose
open world
developers are
survival.
doing to AAA what YouTubers did to network
Indeed.
television, what streamers did to cable news. They are proving that you don't need 10 departments and 1,000 employees to make something
you can say
that people
Baldur's
actually
Gate
care about.
3 is
And just like
pretty
how
much
content creators are
indie.
often branded as
I mean, I guess
unprofessional
you
by
can say
legacy
they're like
media,
a double
indie
A
developers
company.
are now getting the same treatment from the AAA
I guess you wouldn't call
establishment.
them
In an article written by
indie.
Brian
Well,
Francis of GameDeveloper.com
I
titled
would
The
still consider them
Deprofessionalization of
indie.
Video Games
Because
was
they
on
have a
full
small
display
team.
at PAX East. PAX East felt like a warning. Explosively successful games by solo devs and small teams are great, but it could lead to the death of vital specialists. He writes, at DICE and GDC this year, I heard talk of a trend in game development that sent a chill down my spine. Deprofessionalization, as A16Z marketing partner Ryan K. Rigney defines it, deprofessionalization is a phenomenon driven by the overperformance of older titles, particularly free-to-play live service games, large studios struggling to drive sales, and the outside success of some solo developers and small teams.
I wouldn't even
These three
consider
forces,
it
he
that.
argues,
I would
will
just
combine
consider
to
it
drive
they're
career
pumping a
professionals
lot of
from the
money
traditional
into those
professionalized
projects for
side
some
of the games
reason,
industry.
only
Some
to
of
come
these
out
people will
with
decide to go
very,
indie, he continues.
very little
Others
content.
will leave gaming
And it's
altogether.
just
And
the
in between, there
right
is a vast
graphic
spectrum
fidelity
of irregular
of the
working
game, right,
arrangements available.
looks
Yeah, I'm going to have to
good and all
stop you
that
right there.
jazz,
The
right?
idea that indie success is driving career professionals out of the industry is such a
mean,
warped
just look
take
at what
that it's
happened to
almost
Overwatch.
impressive. Let's just ignore the
It
last
became
5
Overwatch
years of
2 and they
layoffs,
fucked
project
it up a little
cancellations,
bit
and
there.
ruthless studio consolidation, and instead
right, they're
blame the one
paying the
guy
price
who made a
now a
viral
little
hit
bit.
in his bedroom. That's the villain now? Major studios have been pushing these people out long before indie would even come into this conversation. Specialized talent wasn't being nurtured, it was being discarded. Projects were getting rebooted mid-development. QA is being outsourced, and artists are being chewed up and spat out like there were nothing more than
things
replaceable
nowadays
assets.
are being
Indie
outsourced.
success
I hate
didn't
to
create
tell
this
you.
brain drain. It gave people a reason to leave willingly or a place to go if they didn't.
Whether
So
it's
if
the
those same professionals now look at indie devs and think, yeah, I'd rather take the risk and make something real,
right work
that's not
that's being done on
deprofessionalization,
some of
that
these
is
projects.
liberation. And honestly, that's a
the
good
music,
thing. And this
right,
industry needs more of
sometimes.
it.
Maybe it's
Because the reality is the parts of this industry that this
maybe
article
it's the
feels are being threatened,
localization,
corporate
right,
monoliths
because
like
your-
Activision, EA,
your
Ubisoft, Epic, are the
languages that
same
you're trying to
companies that are
get.
responsible for most of what's broken right now. Bloated budgets, monetization first design, copycat games that are
yes,
designed to
there's
mimic
a lot of
Fortnite or Call of
outsourcing
Duty.
in
If
a
those
sense.
studios are shedding talent, maybe that's because they've become the worst place to put it. And if those same professionals that are being kicked out of the industry go on to build the next Larian, the next Supergiant, or the next Sandfall Entertainment, that's not a loss.
Apparently
That's the
Metaphor
start
was
of
pretty
something
good
better.
too, right?
The writer goes on to say, wandering through these booths, I found a mix of truly excellent and inspiring games, but also found myself bubbling with frustration. Few developers on display were working with teams larger than 3 people. They talked about publishers wanting ever more expensive offerings as a part of their pitch deck. Short-term contractors seemed to be the best way to plug gaps. Why did it feel like so few proper businesses were fighting to get their games in front of players at PAX? Speaking with Rigney and other developers, I sense that deprofessionalization isn't just a catchy phrase to describe the demand side of economics in game industry hiring. It's a frustrating reality that may undervalue games from big and small teams alike. Rigney offered some extra nuance on his deprofessionalization theory in an email exchange we had before PAX. He predicted that marketing roles at studios would be the first on the chopping block, followed by roles that seem to be replaceable to management, even if they're not. I genuinely cannot believe that this article exists. The writer walks through PAX, sees a wave of exciting and inspiring indie games made by teams of 3 or
marketing
fewer,
does
and comes
take up
away
a lot of
frustrated.
money for
Why?
some of these
Because
companies
there weren't enough
too.
proper businesses represented? What does that even mean? You just admitted that these
Because
indie
it is
teams are
hard
doing
to
great
market a
work,
video
but
game.
then you're upset because they're not expensive enough because the teams are so small? And then you go on to quote developers saying that publishers are demanding bigger budgets to take their pitches seriously. And somehow that isn't the problem. You don't see the connection. The developers at PAX didn't create the system, the publishers did. This entire bloated mess is a natural result of an industry obsessed with scale, overspending, and risk aversion. These indie devs are simply surviving despite it. But of course, now we arrive at the heart of the article, that scary word, deprofessionalization, and suddenly the tone shifts. The accomplishments of these studios gets brushed aside. Their success becomes a problem, not a triumph. Because, oh no, they shipped a game that people actually liked without a marketing team, or a Ludo narrative synergy specialist, or a lead experiential curator.
No. Wait.
Guys, I've said this before, and I'm going to keep saying it. One of the biggest issues in AAA development is bloat. Bloated teams, bloated budgets, bloated management structures where nobody knows what the person next to them
does like no
actually even
damage to
does.
that thing.
You end up with departments that are built to manage other departments, pipelines that are so tangled that you can't even see the final product, and a burn rate that is so high it is a miracle that anything gets shipped at all. And then they warn us, brace yourselves,
Oh my
marketing
god,
might be the first
that
roll on the
fucking
chopping
chunked
block.
you for
Good.
half of your
Most marketing
more
departments
than
in this
half
industry
your
are
HP.
completely
Fucking
useless. It has
hell.
never been easier to
playing
get
on
your
expert,
game in front of
isn't he?
players if your game is actually good. You can't fake that kind of traction anymore. You can spend millions of dollars plastering Avowed on trains and buses, put an ad in Times Square, but it won't matter if the game doesn't deliver. Meanwhile, Expedition 33 has people screaming about the soundtrack, the story, the characters,
damn,
the
that
combat,
fucking
because
damage.
the game
Okay, that's
itself
why.
is worth talking about. You don't need a 30-person marketing team if your game hits. You need a game that deserves to. That shift is happening right now. That's what's going on. And it's not deprofessionalization, it's rebalancing. This industry has been top-heavy for too long, and that weight is finally starting to shift towards
apparently,
the people who actually build the damn thing. The article then pivots to
I think
acknowledge a
the
different
issue
kind of success
is a lot
story,
of
the
these
creative
guys are
renegades,
getting
the
like,
ones
they're
that are
not
making
built, they're
weird,
not getting
original,
their
impossible to
deadlines
greenlight
on
games that
time.
traditional
They're
publishers
like
would have
falling
laughed
back
out of the room.
on
Rigby
stuff.
praises them, calling them
They're not
out
even
as
like
this
building
is the
a
only creative industry on the planet where one person
playable
can make $100
prototype
million
sometimes
making something
at
by
every
themselves,
like
which,
certain
yes,
big
true, but the
checkpoint to
tone
make
here
sure
still drips
everything's
with
okay.
discomfort, like it's a cool fluke and not something to build around. Now, to the author's credit, they go on to clarify that small teams aren't obligated to hire anyone. They are doing what they can with what they have, and better tools have made that possible. But here's where the framing starts to slide sideways. They say what feels wrong is that so few people benefit from this new status quo. Not that small teams are succeeding, but that too many people aren't a part of it. They then go back to Rigney and bring up a new example, Aaron Rutledge, former lead designer of League of Legends, Black Ops 4, and Apex Legends, now running a consultant firm called Area Denial, basically a hired gun. The writer admits that his career sounds romantic, but then calls this model a structure that celebrates the few over the many, one that elevates roles like design and programming while leaving out non-essential positions. What is this? How do you go from saying that this is the only creative industry on the planet where one person can make $100 million by themselves to immediately following that with what feels wrong about this is how so few people seem to benefit from this status quo? Do you hear yourself? This is the benefit. That is the shift. We are no longer living in an era where you need to get a green light from a publisher, sit in a cubicle farm for 6 years, and then get your name buried in credits under 5 layers of management. We are witnessing one of the most democratizing eras in video game development history, and somehow your takeaway is, but not everybody gets to enjoy the ride? Of course they don't, but that's always been the case. But now the door is actually open. Look at Path of Exile and Grinding Gear Games, a tiny studio in New Zealand that grew to a 200-person powerhouse that's working on 2 full-scale games. Look at Expedition 33, built by ex-Ubisoft developers, a composer that they found on SoundCloud, and Jennifer Svedberg Yen, a former private equity investor who just wrote what might be this year's Game of the Year. The indie boom is not excluding people. It is including people that AAA would have never hired in the first place.
Pretty good
that
game.
old system kept the gates
Even
locked.
even
this
the
new
story is
era
pretty
is
good.
tearing them down. What you're seeing isn't exclusion, it's a healing process, a long overdue correction of decades of bloat, overreach, and creative stagnation. I'm going to get some people that are going to disagree with me on this, and that's fine. I do not believe in supporting these bloated structures, systems, and bureaucracy more than anything else. All
some
in the
of
name
it is
job
bureaucracy
preservation.
hell. Yeah.
I think that it is a pathetic narrative that is driven by people that resist progress. And in a lot of cases,
it seems like they can't.
They don't want to adapt. They want to make it everybody else's problem. This is something that has happened since the dawn of industries in trade. Anytime there are changes in the market, anytime new technology is introduced, old jobs go out, new jobs come in, some jobs get displaced, and in some cases, like the video game industry, well, the industry gets decentralized.
Skull and
That's
Bones.
why we see
Barely anyone
a private
talks about
equity
that
investor starting to write for video games. Media's gone through the exact same thing. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a guy that worked 8 years in construction that has no journalistic background whatsoever that's writing reviews for video games and writing video essays on YouTube. I think the real problem for these people, and what really scares them, is that average, everyday people are getting involved in these industries and in some cases getting rich because of it, and they don't like that. Freedom is scary.
Yes.
On top of that, these people do not have the credentials that they want. They didn't go to college for it. Sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. Let's be honest. This article, especially coming from the media's point of view, this is more about control. Indie games are harder to predict.
Darkest Dungeon 2,
they're harder to
pretty
market,
good game.
and for them specifically, it is much more difficult for them to monetize from the outside. Not for everybody else, but it definitely is for them. No more guaranteed preview cycles. No more demos behind closed doors. No more getting cozy with their PR team. No, you're on.
Some of the marathon demo. Oh yeah, Jesus.
But this argument is going to.
I think marathon
now
is going. Marathon is like
not
the biggest upset now.
Going indie because indie developers do not hire these.
Because there was some
specialists
people
that only
who actually
do one
wanted
thing.
it,
and it's really funny because
but
it feels like this is the only industry where doing more than one thing is a threat instead of just doing your job. The writer then goes on to say, my PAX trip validated my fear that 3 professions are especially vulnerable in this deprofessionalized world: artists, writers, and those working in game audio or music. These roles seemed vulnerable because on these small teams, they were roles that developers mentioned doing in some sort of shared or joint fashion. All 3 risk compartmentalization as asset creators, their work treated as products you can purchase off of a store shelf. The writer then expands on this fear by pointing to broader industry shifts. He argues that in-house art positions are disappearing as studios are increasingly outsourcing asset creation overseas to cut costs. This move, he suggests, is being reinforced by the rising use of AI-generated art, something he openly criticizes for its poor quality, but sees it gaining momentum anyway. In his view, the value of artists is being eroded not because their work is bad, but because it's now seen as something that can be cheaply replicated or bought off of a shelf. Even art directors, he noted, are surviving not on creative output, but on their ability to delegate. When it comes to narrative, the critique gets a little bit more personal. The writer cites industry layoffs, pointing out that writers made up the highest percentage of reported job losses in the last year. He attributes this to 2 diverging trends: the success of games that minimize storytelling altogether, and the increase in tendency for story-driven titles.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Because, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, a good story, you don't need to write text for it. You can illustrate it by picture art. Right? So it's like, I can see, writing is not neat. All right, here we go.
To be written by a select few, usually the creative director or maybe 1 or 2 trusted collaborators, leaving fewer roles for dedicated narrative teams. He also then reflects on long-standing frustrations that writers face in game development, many of them brought in late, treated as an afterthought, or positioned in conflict with the broader design
you don't
goals.
really need,
Some studios have
I
tried
think,
to
like I said
bridge
before,
this
you
gap
don't
by
really
rebranding
need
writers as narrative designers, combining
writers
them
if you can
with
just do it through
implementation, but
narrative,
the implication,
story,
he argues,
picture,
is clear.
or
Being just a writer is no longer
through,
enough. As for music and sound design, his concerns are much more
scenes.
structural. Audio work, he says, is increasingly handled through asset libraries with implementation
it just really depends
on
how you want to
other
do
team
story.
members. While some composers prefer
You
the freedom
can-
to work
you
across
can do
multiple
it the
projects,
writer
he
route,
sees this shift as another sign
the
that audio
cinematic
professionals
route.
like artists and writers are being
And
treated more
also,
like support
right, you
staff
don't
than essential
really need to
contributors.
dedicate
And
so
there
much
it is,
money
the
into
famous
writing as
self-insert,
well.
the emotional reveal, and
Depending if
honestly,
you
probably the
already
real
have
source
someone
of
on
this
your
article's
team who can
frustration.
probably
It's
do
kind of hilarious that they still
half
can't
the
see the
writing.
correlation. Small teams prioritizing design and programming, and those are the games that are succeeding. I hate to be the one to say it, but artistic roles are less essential, at least at the start. If a game
yeah,
isn't
I mean,
fun, if it
kinda,
doesn't
yeah,
play
they
well,
are.
it doesn't matter how pretty the lighting or how
Because
cinematic
for
the
me,
game
as
feels. Indie
as a
is
computer
thriving right
or-
now
yeah,
because
as a
it's the
computer
exact
scientist,
opposite of
software
AAA.
engineer,
It's
what
gameplay and
have you,
performance first.
I can
everything
literally
else after.
do everything
That's what
myself.
players care about.
Whether
Now,
it's
I'm not
put
going to
in
sit here and tell you guys that
story,
there's
if
no
I
value
can
in
write a
talented
story
artists,
if I
musicians,
wanted
or
to.
writers. Hell, they're some of the most
If I
celebrated
wanted
people
to, I
in the
could
industry. There absolutely
make my
is
own
value
art.
in them. But let's be real, those roles only exist because of
I can
programmers
do all these
and
things.
designers.
It would take a
Without
lot
their
more
core
time.
systems and mechanics, you're not making a
It
game,
would be
you're
a
making
lot more
slideshow
load
with
on me,
music.
right?
These creative roles, no matter
But
how
yeah.
skilled, are built on top
Right,
of
a
a
singular
foundation that they
person
didn't
can
pour.
literally
They're
create a video
contributors,
game.
not cornerstones. And those
you
roles
just
can only
have to
thrive
have
if
the
the studio is
wherewithal,
stable enough,
right, to do it.
profitable enough, and able to actually invest in
Being
things that
able
aren't
to,
essential to
right,
core gameplay.
capitalize
What's wild to me is the complete lack of accountability here. This
on the
article paints it like it's
information
some
you
sort of
can
injustice
put
that small
together.
indie teams often share roles, where creative directors also write, animate, and score the game, where people that are rigging the characters are also building the gameplay systems that they move through. But that's not dysfunction, that's adaptability. That's what a generalist is. That's how most industries work outside of
I
gaming.
mean, that's what a
Hell,
full
I would
stack
bet almost
developer
everybody
does.
that is watching this video right
They're
now
able
does
to
way
do
more than
just
their
a
job title
general
suggests. When I
approach.
worked in construction, I
Right.
was constantly operating outside of
They
my
can
role,
do UI,
handling HR things like
graphics, and
hiring
all
and
that
firing,
stuff,
writing
too.
environmental
They
reports,
really needed
coordinating
to.
with government agencies, researching equipment,
just
contacting
it's gonna take
suppliers,
a little
creating
bit
and fulfilling
more
purchase
time
orders,
because, right,
even
they're one
learning to
person.
read P&IDs and mechanical drawings. I got more involved in the process because that's what my job required. That's what being useful meant. Wearing multiple hats isn't a threat
Correct.
to job security. It's a privilege. It's a
as a
responsibility.
full stack
and in most
developer,
industries,
or any
it's expected.
as a computer
Look at
scientist or
Ubisoft. They
software
are bloated with
engineer,
specialists right now. Yet
They're
they are
basically
completely
fulfilling a
directionless.
lot of
The first
different
Assassin's Creed
roles
trilogy
in
was
that
made with
sense.
around 150 developers. Now they have over 1,000 people working on a single entry, and every release gets further away from what made that series special. Guillaume Broche, Sandfall CEO, is also the creative director of Expedition 33. When that team started with just 8 people,
he
they
was the
all
Devil
had
May
to
Cry
become
guy.
generalists, taking on roles that they had never done before just to make it work. And in some cases, they ended up excelling at things that they had never tried. And you know what? That made the game better. It made it cohesive, because when people are designing systems that are also touching the visuals, the animation, the design, you start to get alignment. You get purpose. You don't get this Frankenstein project where nobody knows what somebody else is building.
Yeah,
or
I mean,
how
that's
this
a
whole thing fits
bureaucracy
together.
hell.
That's
I mean,
the real
well,
problem with
also, I mean, that's
over-specialization.
just
It
working
turns
with a
game
lot of people,
development into
too.
a game of telephone. The longer the pipeline, the
I mean,
more
if you're
distorted the
working
message.
like an
What the
assembly
designer
line,
envisioned
yeah,
at
you're
the
gonna
very
have
beginning
some
gets twisted by the time it reaches the
communication issues
animators,
if
then
you're not,
further when it
like,
gets
up
to
to-
VFX,
being
and
up to date
it's
on
lost
everything.
entirely by the time marketing gets their hands on it. The more segmented the roles, the more disjointed the final product. Maybe the uncomfortable truth that this writer doesn't want to hear is that this industry was never meant to fully support specialists, or at least to the degree that they have been.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe
that's
it's
why
time for more
in-
people to take on
right,
more
when I was
roles, because
studying-
the industry got into this
or
mess
when I'm
that they're in
currently
right
still
now
studying.
precisely because they put too much weight
we
on how
used-
things
we
look
still use
and not how
GitHub,
they play. We've got
right,
studios that are dropping
make
hundreds
sure
of
that
millions of
everyone's on
dollars
the
on
fucking same
graphics
page
and cinematics,
if you're
but they
working
can't even
with a
be
team of-
bothered
right,
to
working with a-
optimize their games to run
working
above
on a
30
project with
FPS.
people.
We've got devs
We
spending
were
6
forced to
months
use
on hair
GitHub,
physics while the
'cause they
combat
wanted to
feels like
make
it was
sure that we
designed
knew
by an
what we were
intern.
doing.
What does the animation budget matter if the story's a joke? What does a beautiful world mean if the systems inside of it are broken? Maybe people need to stop
So
clinging
if
to
these
being
companies
in a
aren't, like, setting
specialized
up some
role
kind
and
of
take a step back and
repository
ask how they are
for you
actually
to, like,
contributing
for everyone
to what
to, like,
matters most,
check in
whether
on
these
what's
games are
going
fun
on
or
and,
not.
like,
So
all
no,
the
I do
work
not buy into this
that's being
narrative of
done, that's kinda bad.
deprofessionalization. Not for a second. What we are seeing isn't the decay of the games industry. It is its next evolution in game development. And honestly, it's not even new. This is what the industry was born from. Small teams, self-starters, people that knew how to build the whole damn thing, not just a piece of it. Is a professional somebody that only knows how to do one job, or is it someone who understands the entire process and can bring something to life from start to finish? Because I know which one I would hire. This whole conversation feels less like a warning and more like job preservation for the sake
Like
of
for
job
me, I was
preservation.
thinking
And
about
look, I
doing
get it.
a
Transitions
small
are
little
hard.
game.
Watching your field change around you is hard.
I don't know
but
how long
we're not
it's probably going to
entitled
be
to the
like
status quo. The
right,
reality is
the
the
class
industry is
that I
shifting.
was taking,
You have
a
to
senior
shift with
design
it. That's
class,
not
they were
cruelty.
able to make
That's
a
life.
game in
Dust
3
yourself
months.
off, learn something new, expand your role, and if you believe that your
Most
skill
of it
set
was-
is so
all of it
valuable
was
that you
fully
need to go
functioning,
out there
too.
and prove it in more ways than one. Before
I mean,
every
sure,
studio
it
wanted
was
to balloon to
lacking in
20,000 employees.
in
Most of this work was
features and
contracted. Teams were leaner,
details
production was
and
tighter,
stuff, but
and when
I
one
mean, they
game
made
had
fully
ended, well, those
functioning
people then
games.
moved on. But over time, these companies got greedy. They scaled up their output. They held on to these massive headcounts, and instead of letting people go when one project ended, they slid them on to pre-production of the next project over and over until the weight of this all collapsed. That is not Indie's fault. That is your leadership's fault. Indie is not a threat. It's the path forward. It's the
I mean,
path
there are
out.
ways
Unless
to
you
make
genuinely
right.
believe
There
that
are
your
ways
entire
to
career
make it
hinges
so
on
that you don't
someone
have
else
to
giving
put a
you
lot of
cubicle
work
and a
on your
title.
plate.
There is an opportunity
Right
for
there's
you
a
out
thing
there.
called
People are buying
fucking
these games.
right
They are
divide
selling,
and conquer.
and they're not just
right?
passion projects
I mean,
anymore.
it's a
Many
very
of them are growing into
known
sustainable,
fucking
expanding
right,
studios with the resources to
scientific
be able to
term
hire new
or,
specialists
right,
when they
engineering
scale.
term in
That's the
terms
natural
of
cycle. That's how a new
software,
forest grows, not from keeping dead trees standing, but from
data
planting new
structure or
ones and giving them
anything
the
like
space
that,
to
right?
rise. So if you're standing around waiting
Basically
for AAA to save your
scoping
job,
different-
I have bad
different
news. They're
steps of
not
the
going
problem.
to, but someone else might.
And then
hell,
working on
might.
each
You know,
of those
it's actually
things.
funny. The last time that I read an article from GameDeveloper.com, they had written an article that was called "Yelling is Not Journalism" by Brendan Sheffield, and that article was essentially saying that, you know, the whole Baldur's Gate 3 drama, when that was going on, was an opportunity to tell players why they get unfinished games and basically why we should be okay with it, and we need to be empathetic and we need to buy microtransactions and DLCs, and how it's not the developer's fault.
No, pay.
But the funny
Give
thing
us
is,
more money
we're
for
customers.
these.
We don't have to
for
be
these
empathetic.
skins
And this
that
entire
don't
thing
do
yet
shit.
again reads like a cry
We're gonna
for
cancel
empathy.
the game in
But
5
empathy
years.
doesn't make better video games, and better video games need to be made for these companies to be able to make the money to be able to keep.
I mean,
these
just look at
specialists
gacha games. A lot of
employed.
gacha games that fail
Jobs follow the
tend
money.
to
So regardless of how
right,
necessary
tend
you
to
think your job is,
stop
or how much it
providing
needs to be
services
protected, at
after
the end of the day,
after
we
a
are the
certain
ones
amount
that
of years,
decide
right?
what's necessary
because
and
they're
what's
not breaking in any money. They can't keep
Inflation
the
keeps
servers
going up. The price or cost of living continues to increase, and now these game companies want to increase prices on video games.
Yeah, that too.
Players cannot gamble on
each year
$70
too.
to
Shit
$80 games.
increases.
And those are the kind of games that these specialists are involved in. Why do you guys think that Doom the Dark Ages isn't doing well in sales? It's because the game does not deliver on the value of the price that it's being charged for.
I mean, I think it's because more people are playing on it on Game Pass. I don't think he says it here, but the reason why not a lot of people show up on Steam is because they're probably playing it on Game Pass. Because it is on Game Pass, and it is cheaper to do it that way. So that's probably why they're doing that. So, at the end of the day, is it hurting Doom's sales? Probably, yeah. Right? It's right there. Yep, Game Pass right there. Hot. It's hot. Look at that. So, yeah. So that's really the reason why it's not doing so well on Steam. It's because everyone's doing it on Game Pass because it's cheaper.
But they have to charge that price, otherwise they're not going to be able to make the money back to be able to pay the specialists that they have working on the game.
Yeah.
Industries and the world itself is constantly evolving. And
does he mean why it's like
$70
$70
or
or
that your
something?
job is somehow more valuable than others?
Yeah, I mean, the
think that it
games
is
have already
incredibly
increased to
narcissistic for you to
$70
believe that
to
the world
one
needs
point
to
at one point,
capitulate
right?
or
I mean, you
protect
still
you
get a
because you are only
variation
good at
of
one
like
thing,
right,
or you only want to do
$50,
one thing.
$70 games, right? I mean, there's still
You
those
can do
variations.
that. You can be that person, but if you're going to be
But
that person,
but
you have
some
to
of these
live with the
high-end games,
consequences
right?
of
They're
your
starting
lack
to
of
become
flexibility.
$80,
If you do
$90,
not bend,
$100,
you break.
right?
And I think a lot of these folks are going to break.
Especially with
You are
the
not going to
different
get any pity
editions.
from the average consumer. It's just not going to happen. Because we all know that if we say something like, that's not my job, that almost always leads to not having a job.
I mean, that's
And
above
when
my
it comes
pay
to
grade.
writer, artist, or musician,
I don't get
these are
paid for
things
that shit, so
in
I
common
can't say.
society that we view as hobbies. And you guys have the
I'm not
opportunity.
even getting
No,
paid
you
right
guys
now.
have
shit.
the privilege of
Fucking-
making that your job. It is
Just
up
a
to
broke
you to
ass
protect
college
it,
student.
not the world. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If
Well,
you guys
I
did
guess
enjoy the video, make sure to
not
share the
really
video with your friends.
college
Make sure
student
to
anymore, but
like the video, share the video. I already said share.
I'm about
Subscribe to the channel.
fucking
Comment down below. Hey, follow me on Twitch. Follow me on
graduate
Twitter.
soon.
I'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay cool. Stay righteous. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Family, 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 family.
Family. Family, 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 family. Okay, anyways. Yeah, there's a lot of good comments here. I only buy indie games nowadays. Indie games hurt AAA developers. I already said I only buy indie games. You don't have to sell it to me. You get used to not owning your games. Don't you guys have phones? We will brick your console that you don't own if you alter or use things we don't like. Jailbreaking your consoles, in a sense. Games are now $80 to $100, even more for physical that aren't even physical games. They're glorified digital codes in a box. If you're a real fan, you'll spend $80. Now they want our sympathy? Forgive me if I enjoy the fire on the horizon. Yeah, that's another thing too, right? They were supposed to right? They were supposed like all the physical games since you're buying it all digital now. They were supposed to lessen the cost, but they didn't do that. If anything, they increased the cost, which is like, huh? So you're now paying more money for a digital game and a digital code with no physical disc, right? You don't even get the right game box anymore sometimes. So it's like, yep. See ya. Yeah, deprofessionalize. Yeah, right. Constructed term designed to imply a negative tone. But the more accurate term, decorporatization, and suddenly it becomes clear why indie game studios are such threats to the industry. Competition, free market, I mean, right, these the companies are just trying to rationalize, right, the cost that they want you to pay. And, I mean, just look at what happened to some of to the hardware, like NVIDIA with their AI push and, like, moving away from gaming cards and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's just how corporate industries go. They shift focus whenever they need to, if they have to. But yeah, there it is for legendary drops. Give them a follow and a like. It drops some nice videos of information.